Hey, 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 beautiful beings. Welcome in. And on today's episode, we have Sarah Hope joining us. Welcome in, Sarah.
Thank you. So glad to be here with you.
Thank you. Sarah is a plant medicine advocate, coach, and certified nature retreat leader, specializing in nature-connected soul work, microdosing, and psychedelics with the ultimate goal of harmony in the living world. A mother, musician, and ceremonialist. I love that. Thank you very much for being here with us, Sarah, today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. It's so fun that you're on the other side of the world and we can still connect.
I know. It's really interesting because I found that the way that I connected with you was because I was specifically looking for women who are working with plant medicine, and like I was trying to just find people, and I think yours was the first name that I came across. So I was like, I need to reach out to this lady and find out, the work that you're doing. So do you want to just share with us, first of all, how you got into working with plant medicine initially?
Yeah. Gosh, there are so, you know how there are those moments, those Dharma moments in your life where you, in retrospect, like I could start that story at like 5 years old, or I could start that story at 40 years old.
Yeah.
It's hard to figure out where to start, but I think I'll just split the difference and kind of start in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So my father was a physician, and I always had a draw towards healing. But I had sort of like a scientific medical spin on it. But when I was just fresh out of college, I happened to have this job where I had like my side hustle, where I was tutoring adult professionals in Spanish. And it wasn't really huge, like I only had 1 or 2 clients, but this one man came into my life and he was seeking out tutoring in Spanish, which is what one of my majors was. The other one was psychology. And he was telling me ultimately that he was learning Spanish so he'd go down to Peru to study shamanism, and he was a psychiatrist. And like something really popped. I was just like, what? Wow, what? Whoa, what? It just answered this kind of constant question that I had had since childhood about like consciousness, healing. There's something else. I would go to the hospital with my father and look, and I just I couldn't quite see that light, that I thought would be healing, but I always kind of knew it was there. And then when he was describing, I was just like really opened up, and eventually he invited me to go down to Peru and study, but I had little kids, and so I didn't go. And I said no to that call, but I really understood that like something had shifted there. There was some sort of calling, and I did work with consciousness. I worked with Tibetan meditation, and I became a priestess and held ceremony and worked with I read all the books he gave me and studied shamanism. I just didn't actually go.
Yeah.
And then when I was 40, when I turned 40 years old, I went back to plant medicine. Like I answered the call, and my experience of the plants were like, well, you're here now, we called, and that maybe you feel like you waited too long or you waited a long time, but like this is now, it's been a long time for you, but it hasn't been any time for us. And so the calling was there, and working with plant medicine, I started to come to understand that would be my life path and my work, and that's what was being asked of me. But I didn't say no. I didn't say yes right away. I said no, and I went back to teaching. I went back to my teaching profession, but it just didn't make sense. Just what we were doing, and we were educating children in these like square boxed off buildings, and like the misery and suffering they were experiencing just like no longer made any sense. And so and so that kind of set off my work. And then my physical body got sick, and I used plant medicine to heal it. And once I had done that, I really understood that the calling was there to help other people. So yeah.
In terms of, you said like your physical body got sick, what did that look like for you? Because it seems to be a common theme with like most people that I speak to on the spiritual journey. There's a point where there's something happens with your physical body and you're looking for alternatives or something different. So what was your experience?
Definitely. I mean, I think it was my body's wisdom, really. Like, I think that the illnesses were my body's way of saying, like, this isn't the way that you were meant to live. And so for me, it was a lot of things. It was like chronic urinary tract infections, kidney infections, chronic anemia. Like, I could not keep the minerals in my body, couldn't keep the iron in my body. So it was just exhaustion. And then also neuropathy in my foot. And that was actually what drew me to microdosing. I was experiencing from old injuries, sports injuries. I was experiencing neuropathy, like kind of just like my foot was like leaving the system, sort of thing. Like, it was just sort of drifting away from consciousness, and there was like a lot of peripheral pain. And I was offered some, ways of dealing with that in the allopathic system that seemed so dangerous. And it was shocking to me that, here I am, this whole being, and we're going to change my whole psyche to deal with my foot. That doesn't seem like that wasn't going to work for me. That didn't seem, to jive. Like, things that you might take would change your whole nervous system in a possibly negative way to sort of like deal with this part. And it just didn't work for me. And I knew I've ever since, I just my whole life, like, plants have had their way of like telling me how maybe they have a message or they could help me. And I felt that way about the mushrooms. I felt that they could help me with the neuropathy. And I started to do some research and found out that actually, indeed, psilocybin and lion's mane mushrooms can be regenerative to the nervous system. So instead of going with the doctor, the allopathic treatments, I went to psilocybin and started treating that way. But there was nobody out there to talk to me about it at that time. There was nobody who were like doing it, nobody knew what I was talking about. And so I had to just kind of become a little scientist in my own kitchen and learn to microdose. And eventually there were resources that showed up, and I started like working for some of those companies. But that's kind of how it happened.
And so with the microdosing, so did it work with your foot? Did it help to heal your foot? And was there other sort of effects that it had for you?
Yes. Yeah, I do not experience neuropathy in my foot. And it really makes me question what people call a chronic condition. Now in my work, I since went and trained to become a coach. I not only train in psychedelics, but in coaching. And I see a lot of people, and people will come and say like, oh, well, I was told by my doctor, this would never go away. This is a chronic condition. And I was like, gosh, what a sentence to give somebody, and how do we even know that? Right. So, because I don't have neuropathy anymore, and I still, I use psilocybin mushrooms, and so it did. I don't like to use the word cure. I think I prefer the word heal, because I think that healing is like this way that we're always being given an opportunity to come into wholeness, whereas cure is some sort of like expectation of permanence. Whereas, we don't know what's going to happen from any given day, and it kind of takes us out of living in the moment. So, but it works. Yeah.
So you mentioned as well that you went off to work for some different companies. So were they already like established companies in the US who were sort of like supporting people with psilocybin therapies, or was that some sort of different?
They were just like starting to, share, give information, consult, things like that. One was in Europe. And then mostly I worked in private practice as well. So just doing private consultations.
So you had your own microdosing experience and you'd done your research on psilocybin. So at what point did you decide to start supporting others on their microdosing journey as well, and with psilocybin?
Well, at first I knew I had to leave the teaching profession because like my body wasn't going to be able to sustain it, like the constant stress. And so at first when I left teaching, I really needed like a profession, and it didn't occur to me at the time that like psychedelics would be a profession. But I did start coaching with people. But since I had the background in microdosing, I started to work with them on that if they wanted to. And then people started to come in that way. So initially I was gonna, be working with coaching, mindfulness, nature connection. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, but people just started to want to learn about microdosing. And so then I started to help them. And then that became what I was doing.
Yeah. It's funny how your work evolves, isn't it, over time when you're following this journey. It's like you have in your mind, you're like, this is where I'm going and this is where I feel I need to be. But then other things have a way of coming in. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's funny because I think so often we think that we can like control the outcome, we can control the future. We can definitely prepare and, put some structures in place for the future, but it's definitely like a painful illusion to think that we can control. I like the idea that we can, maybe we can play with what happens, and that, the universe will play back, you throw a ball into the universe and it'll throw it back to you, in some unexpected and novel way. And probably just with the curiosity of seeing what you might do, what you might create, what you might bring to the table.
So you also run retreats in Oaxaca, don't you, in Mexico?
I do.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about what those are like and how the experiences may be different as well to people who are microdosing?
Yeah. So I run retreats a lot, women's retreats and retreats around, the wheel of the year, the pagan holidays. But I really had like an inner desire to connect with like the indigenous traditions around psilocybin. Like I really had a heart calling to go to Oaxaca. And when I first did that, it was just an experiment. I planned a trip, and I just happened to get connected with this family, and it was so lucky because they only serve really small groups, and they only serve in season, and such high integrity. And the way they work with the mushrooms is so beautiful. And I just happened to be able to connect with them and their ancient traditions. And I just fell in love with that. And I brought a small pilot group down, and there were groups they were from every, ranging from like age 30 to age 70. That was just who showed up. And I just put it out there. And I brought this group, and it was just so deep and so transformative. And like all of the walls just disappeared between people, and we became like this family. And I just knew that was something that I needed to do for people, like bring them to have this living experience of psilocybin on the land. It's, I've taken a lot of plant medicines in my life, a lot of experiences, but I can't say that any of them were it's the most potent one after 3 days of like intense dancing and drumming and sweat lodge, and then going on the land and taking the mushrooms fresh. It was like the most connected and living experience that I've ever had. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I forgot. Didn't forget, but I was in Mexico when I was 19, and I lived in Guadalajara, and I went on this coach tour with there was 12 of us from the UK. We all just hired a coach and went on a trip, and we went through Oaxaca. We stopped in Oaxaca, and I think I did a walk around, and then I've also been to Chichen Itza, and I find it interesting how when I'm reading a lot about plant medicine now, it keeps taking me back to Mexico, and I keep hearing about Mexico, and it's like, oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, Lindsay, I hope you will join us someday. I think the July one might be close to full, but I will go again in October because there's enough people that really, really want to go and have this experience. We can experience psychedelics, but experiencing like the culture and tradition and like the origin, it's amazing. And like it's really, really special experience to have.
Did you find it really important as well to understand more about, like you said, like the indigenous side of the psilocybin and the culture, as well as just learning about psilocybin itself?
Yeah, I did. With plant medicines, plants are teachers, and there is a framework for interacting with plant teachers that exists in the fabric of humanity. And I think, from what I experience here in the US, this idea of like consciousness medicine feels new to us, but it's not new. Like there is a tradition, a way of connecting with culture, with self, with context that is ancient. And I really do think that, some of those traditions gave rise to the consciousness that we understand today, So, yeah, there is something about doing it that way.
And so the people who go on retreats, like you said, do they find it like when they come back, do they need time to really process some of the stuff that's come up for them? Because I didn't fully understand the whole integration process until after I had my own experience. And then I was like, wow, this actually takes a while to really embody the insights that came up and to integrate it. Do you find that with a lot of people who come to your retreats that they need that time afterwards to integrate? Yeah, the insights.
Yeah, it's crucial. So many things can happen in integration. My own experience of describing like coming back to my life and having it not make sense anymore is an integration issue, right?
Yeah.
Many people will like meet their true nature, or get to walk in the beyond and see just how beautiful and alive and magnificent they are, and then come back into a life where they've been living small, and experiencing the pain of that, and then the quandary of like, how do I live from my truth, right? How do I confront these parts of my life that have been painful? So yeah, there is, it's up to each the individual, of course. But yeah, there's an integration process to be had afterwards, and it can take a long time. Even just last night, I was, reflecting on an integration piece of a ceremony that happened in Oaxaca 2 years ago, and realizing something about it that was useful and important for my life, and required more, like some shifts, in the way that I meditate and the way that I move about in the world. So yeah, integration is a huge process.
And have you yourself ever had like a challenging experience with mushrooms, or one where you're like, oh my God, I'm never touching them again, that's it, I'm done?
I've never said, mushrooms are a good friend and ally of mine. And so I've never said, no, I'm never touching them again. But I have had my share of challenging experiences, and they were really important, experiences like where I was wild, like trying to shake, like shake trauma out of my body, release it, get it out. Yeah, and having to look at all of the things, all of the shadow, having to take this inner experience, seeing parts, parts that were scary, parts that were ignored, parts that I ignored for a reason, and now I can't ignore them anymore. I am not a believer in a bad trip, but a challenging journey is definitely a possibility, and I think an important experience to have. Yeah.
In terms of understanding yourself more, in terms of being able to understand it and be there for others?
Both. Both. I mean, we have a shadow, and we have things that we didn't want to deal with that we put in the shadow, but it's still there, so going through the process of excavating or getting to know or relearning about the parts we put in there, revisiting them with a more mature mind, is really, really, I think, important in coming to wholeness. And also, for me as a medicine woman, having those experiences means that I understand them and I don't fear them or try to, try to guide somebody away from that experience, but rather I can walk with them, through different difficult shadowlands, places that are hard, places we resisted, and now need to face. So,
yeah. I know in terms of like shadow work, I don't know about you, but this full moon that's coming up for Scorpio, there's like, this last week has been uber challenging in terms of doing shadow work for myself. And at times I felt like I've been going a bit crazy because I'm like, it feels as if like my ego mind, I can hear my ego mind talking, and then there's this other mind talking as well, and I'm just like, oh my days, I'm like, please, let's just but doing like a lot of grounding, a lot of meditation, a lot of journaling is helping me, and doing that shadow integration work is quite massive as well, isn't it, for people?
Yeah. I mean, I really do think it's a part of wholeness. I can't pretend that it isn't there. At a fundamental level, everything has to have its opposite. And I think it's beautiful and powerful that having a relationship with the shadow. But it's true that the ego, would love to keep us out of it. Would love to, give us an experience of ourselves that is more manageable, I suppose, more tame.
Yeah. Do you find that having worked with psilocybin, that it's changed your perception on life?
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's like looking at life from, standing here on the planet, or having the opportunity to like go onto the moon and look at all of life, in that perspective. Like that perspective shift is huge when you know that consciousness is part of you and in you, and something that is yours to work with, but also like enormous and connected to everything, that it can't help but like change how you experience life.
So if there was someone who's watching this and they're contemplating either doing like a mushroom experience themselves, let's go with that one first. What would you recommend if someone was like, right, I'm going to go do it, I'm going to just go and buy some mushrooms, I'm going to have an experience myself? What advice would you give to them if that was in their mindset?
Yeah, that's a good question. Anything could happen. It's great to, if you can get a guide, it's great to have one, or a coach, to at least, help you process and prepare for that experience. But, at the very least, a very like, picking up some knowledge, to give somebody who might sit for you. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of good structure out there for how to be, I think it's really important for the first time to, have somebody who is just neutrally holding the space, not trying to fix or change, but just neutrally holding the space and witnessing the experience.
Yeah.
So I can't say that I recommend just going out and buying a handful of mushrooms, but people do, and sometimes it goes really well. So
yeah.
I would say lots of meditation, lots of preparation work, lots of journaling, self-reflection, having a conversation with your parts that might be resistance. In a journey, resistance is what creates dysphoria. And so just noticing how those parts that might resist or might fight could create a difficult experience. So maybe just, before doing that, just practicing openness, practicing surrender, practicing being with what is, because, when the journey comes, where it's going to be a very enormous experience of what is. And so learning to accept that is going to yield, a much more healing result.
And what about if people are looking at microdosing as well? What sort of advice would you give to them if they're like, right, I really want to try microdosing? What sort of advice would you give them? Because it's very different experience.
Yeah, similar. I think it's great to get a coach or an advisor if you can. I would say start low and go slow. I like to see people build up confidence and, really start at like a level that they might not feel that's sub-perceptual. No reason to, go full in on the first day. You can build up to it and see how you can function in your life. Also, just, having an awareness that microdosing doesn't heal like in the same way that maybe SSRIs or antidepressants do. Microdosing will work by allowing us to access parts of ourselves that are holding on to something, keeping us in a state of depression or anxiety or disconnection from the world. So reconnecting with the world and reconnecting with our emotions can lead to like increased emotion at first. So people might say, like, I'm crying. Is that normal? And I would say, yeah, that's definitely normal. That's exactly what needs to be released, or people might say like, I'm a little more tired. Is that normal? Like a lot of things are normal. We don't know what's going to happen when we start to connect to parts of ourselves that we've been keeping at bay for a while, but it's going to be, it's going to be positive ultimately, but it can be a little bit of a learning curve or a disequilibrium at first, or it can be euphoric and then change later on, once you've got the euphoria, and then a week down the line, like then come the tears. So, I would say again, openness and surrender to what's going to happen. There's no textbook on what's going to happen to everybody, because everybody's internal landscape is different.
And everyone's experience is different. Everyone's like childhood is different. So like you said, whatever is going to come up is going to be different for every single person. It's a bit like when you have like a Reiki healing session, or if you have any sort of healing session, I suppose it's like what comes up for one person is not going to be the same result for someone else, is it?
No, yeah. In that way, it's exciting, but I think we have to be willing to lean into the unknown.
Yeah, definitely. And so in terms of so over here in the UK, they've started drip feeding articles into the mainstream media about how psilocybin can support people with depression, and how there's companies are looking at doing some research now on psilocybin and depression, which is awesome. But over there in the US, certain states have started decriminalizing psilocybin. So what does that landscape look like for you over there in the state that you're in?
It doesn't really manifest so much in the physical reality, but it does manifest in like the attitude towards psychedelics. One thing well, I live in Colorado, so we've been through a cycle like this before with cannabis, where, you know, legalization, there was enough evidence to support legalization, first medicalization and then legalization. And the attitude about it changed, you know, where it used to be such a taboo, such a stigma. The attitude started to shift, and it just started to be like normalized. And then of course, like there's the chaos of venture capitalists wanting to get involved. And then there are all kinds of people, you know, there are just people hanging a shingle, you know, just making themselves into some sort of expert. And that, you know, that's bound to happen. It can be like opportunistic. And I think that's starting to happen now. Mostly it's just like people will talk about it in a way that just feels very normal, which I think is ultimately positive. But then there's that other layer of like people, kind of like a gold rush sort of layer, you know, which is kind of counter to the way that the medicine works. You know, the medicine works with patience and time, you know, and so we really have to take time to understand that. And those conversations are good. You know, we have to like let go of the narrative, like this is a panacea, it's going to fix everybody.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I think, what was I going to say again? Yeah, I think that's the thing as well. It's like, you know, reading, like I've read so much about psychedelics and plant medicine over these last like few months, and you know, people talk about this psychedelic resurgence, and you know, about, for me it's like, having done like energy healing work and been in sort of like the spiritual arena for so long, it's like everything takes time. And you know, microdosing for me, I found like it's been a very sort of like an awesome tool for me to work with, to understand it, to experience. But like you said, it's not like a quick fix either for people. It's not like a magic cure. It's not going to like have, you know, it's not the one thing, is it, that is going to support people. It's like a combination. It's doing the meditation, it's doing the journaling, it's using, that's my feeling. What do you feel about it?
Yeah, the success is like really in the way that we work with ourselves, right? And the way that we start to bring ourselves back into balance, because it's not, you know, it's really helping us access the parts of ourselves that have the potential to heal us. But we also have to be willing to be with those parts, right? And not expect, like, it's an age-old quandary, expecting something to come from the outside and fix us and make us happy. You know, just like a new, you know, a brand new house could make us happy for a couple of weeks, you know, but we still have to be us in that house. And so, you know, we have to let go of the expectation that something is going to come from the outside to fix us, and start to embrace the awareness, the inner awareness, the self-acceptance, the ways of being that help us to feel whole and natural here on the planet, and kind, you know, kind inward, kind outward, you know, start to contribute to humanity in a way that is beneficial and nourishing, because that's the other side of the story. You know, once we can heal and we're not totally locked inside of our own, you know, fear and suffering, then there's this, you know, other layer of like being in humanity in a way that's healing.
So last question, lovely. But so how do you see sort of like the future of psychedelics? Big question.
No idea. You know, I've read and seen a lot of podcasts like this will happen, that will happen. I had no idea this was going to happen. Like when I started out, this was illegal and like taboo, and nobody talked about it. And, you know, going from that to being able to like talk about it. And I talk about it all the time on podcasts and interviews or with people. And, you know, I don't know. It's have to wait and see what's going to unfold. You know, I really hope that it will be equitable, kind, pro-human. You know, I hope that I hope that there will not be an exclusion of certain communities or types of people. You know, I hope it'll be democratized in ways that people in communities can help one another. I'd like to see that. You know, I've definitely, I've had the privilege of teaching on some platforms that are open to the public, and been able to teach skills that people in communities can use to help one another. So I'd love to see that happen. You know, much like the therapy model, there are some skills that can be taught in communities where people in communities can help one another without having to seek, you know, a therapist or a guide or a shaman when they can't, even though that might be ideal. Like having people in communities have the skills to help one another, I think would really, really help this movement to just become more equitable. Also, you know, people should be allowed to grow nature in their homes, in their ways if they want to, and not have, you know, their power stripped from them by some big company deciding that they can patent nature in some way, or that they can patent shamanism. You can't patent shamanism, and you can't patent nature. You know, that's something that's not ours to do. So, you know, there's some people that would like to do that, and hopefully the consciousness movement is enough to not allow that to happen. You know, maybe we'll be able to see a different way, but you know, this should be a way to re-empower people and not to strip their power away from them. You know, so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Again, there's like, I'm seeing a lot of companies who are it's like they're trying to jump on the bandwagon, like you said, and to synthesize the psilocybin. And yeah, for me, that just doesn't fit right, and it doesn't feel right. You know, it's very corporate and it's money making, and it just doesn't feel aligned with what the mushrooms were here to do. So
yeah, I mean, our relationship with plant medicine is personal and private. It doesn't really belong in the hands of some large corporation that gets to decide how we do and don't use our consciousness.
Definitely. So Sarah, if anybody wants to find you, I'll put all your links anyway below, but if anyone wants to find you, where's the best place for them to head to?
Well, you know, my website's a good start. I have ways to get in touch there on my website. It's just Sarah Hope Coaching LLC. It also links to forest medicine coaching, but as laws are changing, I'm going more towards my original LLC name and my own name, just because the liability of the word medicine, I'm a strong believer, and you know, that medicine is held in nature. But yeah, so Sarah Hope Coaching LLC, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, I love to talk to people. I love to get in touch. So
fabulous. Well, thank you very much for sharing your time and energy, Sarah. I truly appreciate it, and wishing you every success and every abundance.
Same to you, Lindsay. Thank you for holding this space and just holding the space of curiosity. I really see how important and beautiful that is. And so, yeah, thank you for bringing people together to have these important conversations.
Well, thank you very much, lovely.
I hope you come to Mexico with us.
I
have a feeling you're meant to be there.
Thank you, lovely.
Yeah.